Good morning, Steve here in Sydney. Um, I've got something for you, and that is a useful definition, a rule of thumb you can use, and it's the difference between a human and a pseudo-skeptic. They are distinctly different, and I'm going to give you the attributional difference, what makes the significant difference between a human and a humanoid drone that we normally call a pseudo-skeptic. The differences between them are a single compelling issue. And basically it comes down to thought habits. Two main types of thought we have. We're normally all preoccupied with our daily existence. It seems to be getting more and more difficult in the modern world, more complex, more challenging than ever. We have to spend a lot of time pondering a whole lot of mundane possibilities and outcomes for ourselves just to keep food on the table. But most people do consider things far greater than that, such as stuff that we don't really understand. They return to it every few weeks or months, and typically they are so complicated and so difficult we resign ourselves to likely never understanding it. And so we put these things in the too hard basket, but every now and again we return to this too hard basket and mull it over for a while. And we may be waiting for evidence to turn up to make a little bit more sense of the too hard basket, you see. Now, that's a defining feature of humans. Now, many people over many centuries have wandered around this too hard basket, working with the inexplicable mysteries and the question of why we're here and how we got here and that sort of stuff. And they often invent very complicated thought systems, philosophical systems. There are entire religious systems built around trying to explain those very difficult questions that most of us leave in the too hard basket. And the religions are simply metaphors with some mistakes, forgivable mistakes. And the paranormal is another thing that turns up. It just seems to bring imponderable things to your attention, that astonishing things can happen in unexpected ways, and there can even be physical evidence of it. These seem to elucidate the too hard basket sometimes, because some people do make up successful metaphors and actually do personally improve their own lives. Now, that's what you get by mulling over decade after decade the too hard basket. And now here is what makes you inhuman. It's this simple. You deny the existence of the too hard basket. This is what makes you a drone, a facsimile of a humanoid. It makes you a drone to insist the too hard basket doesn't exist at all. And it can all be explained by the most mundane, silly explanation like fraud, 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 falsehood, fraud, chicanery, hoaxing, fraud. That's what makes the difference between a human and a non-human. Internet pseudo-skeptics, that is, devotees, followers of James Randi, they are the people that practice this denial of the too hard basket. The idea, the really infantile idea that everything has a simplistic infantile explanation is just plain ridiculous. And what you're really doing is refusing to acknowledge the existence of the too hard basket, which is a major part of every human's life. Things just keep popping up every now and again and make you think, I don't know it all. There's more to than just putting dinner on the table and driving a car to work every day. There's more to my existence than that. The great majority of people know this. And in fact, the great majority of people do accept the existence of ESP, the paranormal, and afterlife, because they work at this too hard basket over a period of years and decades. It's almost like the rites of passage to become human, to ponder these the simple concept of the too hard basket. If you don't take it on now and again, you're not doing your job as a human. And that's what pseudo-skeptics do. They, all over the internet, insist that simplistic infantile explanations can wallpaper over all questions. So therefore we can all sit here and just sort of wait for our evolutionary death to occur, and that's it. They've given up their right to be human by insisting on that very, very childish, simplistic, bleak, black and white, obviously wrong outlook. They actually got themselves into what's called the desert of materialism. Pure materialism is a self-defeating philosophy, and it's really only for the most lightweight thinkers, the most handicapped thinkers. Materialism is a go-nowhere philosophy. It ultimately crashes and burns. Incidentally, if you're one of these people that deny the two-hard basket, you are a pseudo-skeptic, you're a devotee of James Randi, and you've never heard the phrase pseudo-skeptic before, well, you should get up to speed on your own little alternative community, your own inhuman community, because it's defined in Wikipedia, your holy book. It actually tells you, look it up, pseudo-skeptics. And it's about lazy, mentally indolent, intellectually indolent people who don't want to do anything except just argue the non-existence of the two-hard basket. Okay, it's beautifully defined by, I think it's Mario Truzzo at CSICOP. It's inside Wikipedia under the heading of pseudo-skeptic. Susan Blackmore is a major speaker there inside Wikipedia. So go have a look at yourselves, see yourselves defined, and guess what? The word was it was made by skeptics to describe other skeptics as being betrayal of the true skeptic philosophy. So go have a look at yourself and see yourselves defined by your own community. Go have a look at what I'm talking about. So, dear skeptics, one might summarize the entire theme of your movement on the internet, and it would be this: that everything can be described in a 300-word vocabulary, and the biggest word can't be more than 4 syllables. And that's all you need to know. That's what pseudo-skeptics would have you believe. And add that to belligerent discourse all over the internet, belligerent disputatiousness, and basically you've dealt yourself out of the human race, you've disqualified yourself from membership in the human race, and you're simply a humanoid lookalike, concerning yourself with the most animal, basic things. The rest of the human race ponders these many series of great questions, which we generally call the two-hard basket. So, by denying the existence of the two-hard basket, you're dealing yourself out of the human race. Now, the good news is, it's not a permanent thing you have done. Not a permanent thing you have done at all. There's a way back into the human race if you want to be with us. Shelley Yates is a lady on YouTube, and she was a dunce, feeble-minded, believed entirely in herself. She was totally self-oriented, and she believed in absolutely nothing, and sat there and waited for the world to spoon-feed her everything. She happily admits to this in her YouTube videos. Shelley Yates is on YouTube. I'll give you the link. Now, how did she get to be so feeble? Well, she does admit quite candidly she had a number of faults that were caused by being molested in her childhood, being depressed for years chronically, that's permanently, and having a whole lot of medications that just made things worse. So her intellectual capacity was dulled down, dumbed down, diminished to practically zero by molestation trauma. Before we go any further, dear pseudo-skeptics, many of you show symptoms of molestation trauma all over the internet. If you've been molested, go and get help. Go and get help if you've been molested. Don't make war on the rest of the world. because you've got an internal wound, an invisible wound that nobody can see. Now, what happened to Shelley Yates? Well, she had a very unusual treatment. She had a near-death experience in a car accident. She went into a lake with her 4-year-old son, and both of them were immersed for quite some time. And to her utter amazement, she met some spirits while she was dying. A near-death experience she had, an NDE. And as a result of this, she was radically transformed. But it was a very slow 4-year process. For months and years afterwards, the spirits kept talking to her humorously. It was only in the bath when they talked to her. She kept reiterating her desire to be just spoon-fed. They were going to give her this marvellous life where she could disseminate wonderful, thrilling, life-supporting information to get people out of their depression. And she just wanted to be their typist. They would talk in her ear, she would type and send the emails. And they kept saying to her, no, 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 no. It's required that you put some of your own personal action into it. You have to flower. You have a life mission. And it took about 4 years to get this message across to her. And she does relate this story rather well in about 6 or 7 videos, well worth watching. This is Shelley Yates on YouTube. She started off with an email list. After 4 years, she was leading million-strong simultaneous meditations in numerous countries all around the world, involving millions of people. So that's quite a change for a lady who used to sit there, immersed in her self-depression, self-pity, and always desiring to be spoon-fed everything. So you're not locked in at all. The paranormal visited her. The paranormal visited her. The too hard basket reached out and touched her. And that's what happens to most people sometime in their human physical existence. Just because it hasn't happened to you yet makes you quite wrong to deny the existence of this too hard basket. It's going to come to you sooner or later, and I would say 99% of paranormal events go unreported. They don't make the press, they're not written up in books, they're not in magazines. They stay in people's heads, which is fine by me. Now, in the case of Shelley Yates, she was put through a radical therapy. It included being put to death with her son. I mean, that's pretty serious therapy, right? And her condition was so serious, so bad, it took her 4 years to actually walk out of the feeble life she was leading. It took her 4 years to get out of it. Now, not advocating that you go and throw yourself in the lake at all, dear pseudo-skeptic. Suggesting you simply acknowledge the too hard basket to exist and let other people who are ahead of you in terms of life experience contend with it in the way they see fit, talk about it, discuss it, because that's their life journey. That's what they're all doing, working with the big questions. Simply let them do it. Leave them alone rather than bad-mouthing them for daring to speculate and discuss. Religions are simply frameworks to explain these great big questions that live in the too hard basket for most of us. We have community leaders doing this, nothing wrong with that. So if you can just acknowledge the existence of the too hard basket, do yourself a big favour, and by so doing you'll be admitting yourself back into the human race rather than being a humanoid copy, a mere shell living an animal existence. It's that simple. Could you see a way to doing that? What do you think? likely never understanding it. And so we put these things in the too hard basket, but every now and again we return to this too hard basket and mull it over for a while. And we may be waiting for evidence to turn up to make a little bit more sense of the too hard basket, you see. Now, that's a defining feature of humans. A humanoid drone that we normally call a pseudo-skeptic. The differences between them are a single compelling issue. And basically it comes down to thought habits. Two main types of thought we have. We're normally all preoccupied with our daily existence. It seems to be getting more and more difficult in the modern world, more complex, more challenging than ever. We have to spend... Now, many people over many centuries have wandered around this too hard basket, working with the inexplicable mysteries and the question of why we're here and how we got here and that sort of stuff. And they often invent very complicated thought systems, philosophical systems. There are entire religious systems built around trying to explain those very difficult questions. Good morning, Steve here in Sydney. I've got something for you, and that is a useful definition, a rule of thumb you can use, and it's the difference between a human and a pseudo-skeptic. They are distinctly different, and I'm going to give you the attributional difference, what makes the significant difference between a human and a lot of time pondering a whole lot of mundane possibilities and outcomes for ourselves just to keep food on the table. But most people do consider things far greater than that, such as stuff that we don't really understand. They return to it every few weeks or months, and typically they are so complicated and so difficult we resign ourselves to